Welcome to the third episode in a Legendarium series about the life and reign of Edward Longshanks. In Part 3, the Second Baron's War, we will talk about the weaknesses of King Henry III and how they led to a baronial revolt. During this civil war, Edward Longshanks truly came into his own. Since the end of the 12th century, the nature of the English monarchy had changed. Plantagenet monarchs in England, hoping to regain control of their old continental empire, made bargains with the nobles. Barons got rules for kingship and partnership in royal government, while the kings got funds for wars which they often squandered in epic defeats. King Henry III was not a bad man, but he was a bad king. Devoted to his family, he took great pleasure in art and architecture, making the rebuilding of Westminster Abbey in the Gothic style his pet project. Unfortunately, Henry's personal virtues became public vices. Because of his devotion to his wife, he gave the Queen's foreign relatives undeserved places at court. Worse still, Henry's building projects drained the treasury, and his piety made him a dupe of the conniving Pope Innocent IV. After his barons rebelled and imposed the provisions of Oxford upon him in 1258, and then forced him to make peace with France in 1259, Henry III became politically irrelevant. The locus of kingship shifted to Henry's son, Lord Edward Longshanks, only 20 years old. Lord Edward became infamous for often changing his position in regards to reform, siding with both the Reform Party and his father as it suited his mood. In 1262, King Henry III secured a papal bull that freed him from the rebels' provisions of Oxford, which effectively put the barons in charge of England. While rebel Simon de Montfort briefly left England for France, he returned in 1263 at the head of a coalition of rebel barons who intended to force King Henry III to behave himself at the tip of a sword. Simon de Montfort surrounded himself with young aristocrats awed by his military reputation earned during the Crusades. The first summer, the rebels captured much of southern England. Queen Eleanor was pelted with rubbish by an angry London mob, which turned Lord Edward against the rebels forever. King Henry and Lord Edward summoned a powerful army at Oxford and deployed it against Montfort's barons in a series of sieges. By all accounts, Longshanks had few peers on the battlefield. One contemporary even called him the best lance in all the world. Yet a pitched battle had not taken place in England for 50 years. Indeed, medieval commanders sought to avoid them, preferring less costly border raids and sieges. Both sides knew that something uncommon and consequential would soon happen. Montfort's rebels pinned white crosses to their clothing, and before the battle, Lord Edward sent a letter to de Montfort's army accusing the Earl of being a perfidious traitor and the falsehood of yourself. When the Battle of Lewes came on May 14, 1264, Lord Edward commanded the right flank of the royal army, and his father Henry III led the left. Recognizing the London militia which so humiliated his mother, Lord Edward led his knights in a thunderous charge. He scattered the opposition cavalry and chased the routed Londoners for several miles, killing and maiming all the men they could reach. By the time Lord Edward regrouped, however, he learned that the rebels had defeated his father during his absence. He returned to hear raucous rebel victory songs and taunts as they surrounded his uncle in a nearby mill. Simon de Montfort captured most of the loyal aristocrats and threatened to behead them if the royal family did not negotiate. In exchange for allowing Henry III to keep his crown, Simon de Montfort demanded that Lord Edward and his cousin Henry d'Almaine become his prisoners. Though Henry III still wore the crown, de Montfort called the shots more than ever. De Montfort ordered barons loyal to the crown to be fined or imprisoned. Even the Earl of Derby found himself an unwilling guest in the Tower of London. Queen Eleanor went into exile where she tried to raise allies in her native France. Chroniclers wrote of an unsettled England, with barons using the chaos as an opportunity to plunder their neighbors and besiege castles. Coast guards patrolled the shoreline, fearing that the French or the Flemish would take advantage. And herein lay Simon de Montfort's great failure. While he could rally opposition to a bad king, his own rule did not bring justice to a kingdom that wanted it badly. Simon de Montfort and his sons got lands and castles seized from the royal party, while the rebel barons who fought at Lewes received little. In May 1268, one of de Montfort's supporters, the 23-year-old Gilbert de Clare, Earl of Gloucester, suddenly changed sides. The so-called Red Earl, on account of his hair color and temper, was angered by de Montfort's use of foreign knights, his self-serving rule, and imprisonment of Lord Edward in a castle cell. To relieve Gloucester's concerns, Simon de Montfort set Lord Edward at liberty but refused to restore his estates, and ordered that he be chaperoned by his son Henry de Montfort at all times. Nonetheless, Gloucester withdrew from de Montfort's court and returned to his estate on the Welsh border. On May 28th, Lord Edward went riding in the borderlands, accompanied by Henry de Montfort. As the young men rode, they began to try each of the horses to see which galloped the fastest. This game allowed Lord Edward to find a mount that would allow him to run for freedom. Once he found the quickest horse, Lord Edward dug his heels into its side and shouted to Henry de Montfort, "Lordings, I bid you good day. Greet my father well and tell him I hope to see him soon and release him." With that, Lord Edward galloped to the castle of Roger Mortimer and then Gloucester's estate. Aware of the need for reform, Edward and Gloucester swore to restore good laws, abolish evil customs, and expel the king's favorites. In effect, Lord Edward stole de Montfort's old reform program. Lord Edward and Gloucester drew on their extended family, and most of Lord Edward's allies came from the barons on the Welsh border, known as the Marcher Lords. Meanwhile, de Montfort scrambled to put together another army, but found the barons angry over his misgovernment and unwilling to help. Throughout the summer of 1265, a showdown loomed between Lord Edward and the younger son of Simon de Montfort, also named Simon. The former chased the latter across the Welsh marches, while Simon de Montfort Sr. still held the king. Finally, the two sides met at Kenilworth Castle on August 1st. At dawn, while Simon and his men still slept, hooves sounded outside the priory where Simon sought refuge, while the younger Simon de Montfort escaped in his nightshirt by rowing across the river. Most of his men became Lord Edward's prisoners. Edward Longshanks had won his first great victory. That wraps things up for this episode of The Legendarium. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, press like. If you want to see more, press subscribe. And if you've got anything to say, let me know in the comments section. Thanks again for joining me, and I hope that you have a great rest of the day.